Hey.
And they stay there. And they stay there. And they stay there.
Okay, yay!
That was so great. That was the best.
You gotta play the hype songs at the beginning.
Yes.
Welcome everyone to our Friday live leadership chat show that we're having today. We have the dynamic school turnaround principal and creator of Principles of Success podcast, Dr. Shana Henry, repping from Sacramento, California. You do not want to miss this chat. We're definitely going to be dropping some gems. To get us started, while we're waiting for some folks to join this chat, we're going to start with an icebreaker question. We just want to know who's in the room. So rep your city and tell us what favorite book you've read in this last year. So what book have you read in this last year? Let's spread the love, spread the knowledge, drop it in the chat. And I'm going to pull up the channel here so that I can just kind of see who is in the room right now. Yay, we're live. Okay. So drop it in the chat and we'll shout you out as well. So would love to just thank you for being here, Dr. Shana.
Oh, thank you.
I really, it's Friday. You could have been anywhere else after a long week of working. But I really appreciate you joining us today. So share a little bit about just yourself and then we'll go into the favorite book conversation.
Yeah, so born and raised Sacramento, California, never left, still live really close to the parents. I went to school here, graduated with a marketing business degree, if you can believe that. Tried that for a little bit, but my heart was missing that service aspect. Like there was something missing. My sister was a science teacher in Richmond, California, which is in the Bay Area. And she said, give it a try. So I decided to start substituting. And I happened to work in a really underperforming, underserved community. And I fell completely in love. It was like magic. It was where I meant to be. And I said, I'm going to go back and get my credential. So that's what I did. And kind of the rest is history. So I've been in education for now over 20 years. And we can go more into that if you'd like. But I'm married for 16 years, have one boy who's 12, love of my life, and that's kind of a little bit about me.
It's so beautiful. So it sounds like you grew up in Sacramento, you're serving in Sacramento. Obviously, I can just tell when you just, as you speak, how passionate you are about the work and just how much it makes you feel alive.
Yes, for sure.
And so before we just jump in a little bit deeper there, I'm going to share some cool facts with everyone about you. If you just joined us, drop your favorite book in the chat. Tell us what city you're tapping in from. And I'm curious to know, what is your favorite book that you've read in the last year? And I'm going to share mine as well.
Can I give two? Yeah. I'm going to give two. Okay. So the first is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's life-changing. I just needed a little more structure in my life. So it's really good about just getting in habits that are good for you. So if you have not read that book, you have to pick that up. The second book, though, was Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. I think this is the must-read book of all time, honestly. It is so deep and thought-provoking about how we live and function as a society when it comes to race and just the hierarchy of belief systems, but so powerful. A must read. Absolutely.
I'm definitely going to add that to my list. I've never heard of the Cast book, Atomic Habits. I have, and I absolutely love the concept of becoming 1% better. And
yes.
Atomic Habits, we actually use that a lot in we have a women's cohort of women of color in school leadership. And so one of the things that we focus on is becoming 1% better, particularly as it relates not just to your leadership practice, but to your self-leadership, wellness,
right?
Stress that comes with the word wellness, movement, all those things. And so anyways, love that book. One book that came to mind, I read a few books, but one of the ones that really stood out to me is an author called Gabrielle Bernstein, and
Mm.
I believe she has a few books, but one of them is called May Cause a Miracle. And it's really all about finding the miracles in your everyday life, finding the miracles that are happening as it relates to relationships, as it relates to forgiveness, as it relates to the miracles in your finances, and
Mm.
manifesting, right? Like, because the more that you're able to name the miracles that are happening in your life, the more you're leaning, your energy is vibrating higher, and you're manifesting the things
Mhm.
that you want to see. And so that was a book that really just impacted me personally this past year. So,
I'm adding that title to my list right now. That sounds
oh,
great.
good. Yeah,
Yes.
let me know once you read it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna add cast to my list. So you all, we're gonna jump in just a moment. Every Wednesday and Friday at 4 p.m., we bring on an absolutely dope, transformational, dynamic speaker in education or just in senior leadership who has done this work. And they're coming on here as the expert, joining me, and we're unpacking a real case study that has been submitted by a senior leader. We keep it anonymous to protect them, to protect their organization, because this is really about empowering our communities with the tools and the thought leadership that they need. Before that, cool facts. You host a weekly podcast for female school leaders. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk about that. So that's it's called Principles of Success, and it's featuring women in leadership, mostly site leaders, but also we've had authors on before, but people in the field. Particularly, we've been featuring women of color because we need to highlight and celebrate all the work that we're doing. And we just talk about challenges and successes. They share strategies of what they've been doing. And even though the audience is really for female school leaders, we welcome any allies and those who are supportive of their journey as well. So every Thursday, an episode drops. And that's a little bit about the podcast.
Okay, good. So we're gonna have to go and check that out. It sounds amazing, and you're right. A space for us is absolutely needed. There's just not enough spaces where we're celebrated
Yeah.
and empowered. And so I love that you're doing that work. You were also, you all. She was voted 2019 Middle School Principal of the Year.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Um,
Thank you.
I'm sure that that has, you put in a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of strategy. There's a lot of talent there. And so just shout out to you and to the people that worked alongside you. And you love to travel as well. You
Yeah, I
travel. What's
do.
your favorite, just out of curiosity, favorite country? Or
I'm gonna say India because I've been 3 times, but it is life changing when you go there for the first time and you just experience everything that's there. I think that's a bucket list item for everybody.
it's definitely on my list. Would you
Yeah.
recommend any specific city? And we're gonna jump into case study, y'all. But we got to get to know relationship building, all of that. And so I like to model it on this show.
Oh gosh, there's India's big, so there's so many places to go. I mean, Bombay is really fun. Jaipur is really beautiful. We went to the tiger wildlife area, and my son and husband got to see a tiger. So there's a lots of amazing places.
Bombay, Jaipur, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah,
It's India's on my list as well. I have
and of course you have to go see the Taj Mahal. So you have to go to Agra and see the Taj Mahal.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, so super excited. You have obviously been in this game for a long time. Here is the case study. For the last couple of years, this was submitted again by a leader. For the last couple of years, my team has had high turnover. The senior leader also resigned, and I was recently promoted to fill the executive's shoes. I'm responsible for filling in vacancies
Mhm.
and uplifting, obviously, the morale. I can't afford to lose any more of our employees. They all work incredibly hard. What are some steps and tips that I can take?
Yeah, that's a heavy one.
It's a heavy
So
one, and it's common.
Yes, it is common. And in fact, I didn't share this, but I'm in my fourth leadership position of leading a school, now a high school. But every school I've been at has had situations like this where it's just been very low morale and there's turnover that's high. So it's almost like you picked this case study just for me. But
I thought it was perfect. I was like, this would be perfect. She's going to do great. She's been in this position so many times, I'm sure.
well, the first thing I'd say to this person is congratulations. You're now the leader of this school. And sometimes jobs find us and sometimes we find jobs. And so you being in this position, it's meant to be. So where it looks really heavy, I would just say it's doable. Everything is figure outable. We can do this, right?
Yep.
So the first thing I would say to this person is you got to assess the situation. Um, I'm assuming this person has been in the system. That's how I read it, is that they've moved
It
up
sounds
to.
like they've been for the last couple of years. Their team has had high turnover. So it sounds like they've been with the team.
Yeah. So I would say you definitely come in with the perception of what you have felt and have seen. But that is your perspective. And so I would say assess the situation. If you can't do one-to-ones with your staff, which I always recommend when you come in and get some data, do some listening circles. You've got to get a perspective of how people in the space are feeling. Your job is not to tell them anything. Your job is to ask, listen, and let the dialogue happen. So I would say that for sure. I'd say get some surveys of your students, do listening circles with your students, because all of that adult stuff that's happening, that falls on the students and they're feeling a certain kind of way as well. So I would say talk to the people and assess the situation. And then from that assessment, develop a plan that's very transparent. So put together what their data fed you and how are you going to respond to that, and then make it public. Let your people know. So when morale is low, it's probably because of lack of trust or lack of transparency, lack of respect. And you build that by building that trust again. So make that plan as public as possible. Let people know what you're hoping to accomplish and how that's going to look when it is. And then the last part of that, I'd say, is get those feedback loops. So you're putting those things out, but you gotta check along the way to make sure people are feeling the way you had intended them to be. So just that alone would be kind of my first phase of just assess, plan, and revisit.
That's so good and so solid. I want to just add a few things and kind of reiterate some of the things that you said. Number one, trust is lacking, right?
Yeah.
That is why people are leaving, right? They're not satisfied with the job. They've been burned in some kind of way. There's
Right.
better opportunities. And so your job as a leader is to really make this a place where the right people stay and want to take ownership and transform this place. And that starts with trust. And it's not, sometimes people take this word, let me build trust, as particularly if they were your colleagues and you became their manager, as like this friendship thing, right? If I'm soft, like if I'm just cool with them, if I just let them do what they want to do, that's often a misconception that we see when a leader goes from, being the colleague and then taking over the shoes and the senior
Right.
leadership shoes.
Right.
And so what I hear you saying is trust, but how do you build trust is through intentional communication, right? I love this action step around that you mentioned, listening circles, how empowering it is
Right.
to your people that you just listen, right? Ask, what your job is to ask questions. How did this feel for you? What has gone well? What hasn't? What's been most difficult for you? Those are just some sample questions. There's many questions that you can ask that are open-ended and that allow and give permission for people to share their insight.
Absolutely.
What I have a question for you, Shana. What would you say though if people, you open up the circle and people don't feel comfortable with sharing their truth because of the past and things that maybe have happened before? That's often something that comes up. What would you say in terms of?
Yeah, that's a really good question and very possible that could happen. But I think the questions you pick, and just like any type of circle we do with students, we ease in, right? We start real easy, and then we can explore and things are going to open up. So I always usually like to start with what's working, right? What's working really well? What do you love about this school? They're always going to be happy to share some of the things, some of their, if that's hard, what is your point of pride? What has been a point of pride for you as you've worked in the system? People love to celebrate their accomplishments, and it can tell a lot. So I think from there, it's then becomes, where do you hope to see the school in 5 years? Because that takes away the personal piece of it and how they might be feeling, right? So where do you hope to see the school in 5 years? What do you want to see from me as the leader? How can I best serve you?
Good question.
Yes. How can I best support you? So what do you want to see from me? And that's going to tell you a lot right there.
And you'd be surprised how often, like, well, how much people are not asked that question. And when they are asked that question, they're kind of thrown for a loop, like,
They are.
what do you mean? You've gotten that reaction before too, right? Like, okay, what do I need?
Right.
Center them. But what's so important about that is that it goes into the feedback loops. You talked about creating an environment where you're collecting the data, you're bringing it back to, hey, this is what you all said is going well. This is where we need to improve, right? And then involving them in the action planning process. Like, so where do you all see us going, given that this is a data? Let these people have the answers.
Yes.
You don't have to come with all of the answers.
Yeah.
But then to your point, particularly around the how can I best support you? What do you need from me as your leader? It creates the space for that trust to happen. You have to authentically mean it though. And then later on, here's what I need from you as well, right? Or even at that moment, like, here's what I need from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's phase 1.
Yes.
Feedback loops. I actually want to add one more thing here, and I want to get your thoughts on it. You know, sometimes so there are a lot of leaders who walk into the space and they may already have to give some people feedback, maybe on some of their behaviors or things that are not serving the organization well. Or maybe someone does something in your first week that is just not, that goes against, right? And so can you speak to that? Like, what, as it relates to the feedback loop and in phase 1 and having to give feedback, you're listening, but striking the balance between that expectations and.
Yeah, difficult conversations in your first week are always really, really hard, right? So you're coming from a place of honesty and transparency. And if you've worked in the system, they have a relationship with you, whether it be good or bad, they know you. But I'm going to sound cliche, but honesty is the best policy, right? So I think if you lead with empathy is the best way to go when you're having a difficult conversation. So one of my favorite books I've ever read is Radical Candor. I don't know if you've read that one, but it's a good one. And you're striking that balance between just being honest, but leading with empathy to put yourself in that position of what it would be like to be called in during mass chaos and needing to have some difficult conversations. But I think if you've allowed them to participate in those listening circles, you're getting a sense of where they are. It opens the door to now say, okay, now we need to talk about some hard things. Now we need to talk about, if this is where you want to see the school in 5 years, this is what I need from you in order to help make that happen together.
That's so good. I love how you also just bring in the partnership piece, right? This is what we need.
Yeah.
This is what it's going to take to get our school there,
right.
Not your school, not my school. So I just want to name that point that you brought up as well. So that's phase 1. What would you say in terms of the morale piece? So you have these listening circles, you're building trust, communication. Oftentimes, it's not even sometimes, oftentimes, a lot of the leaders that we've encountered both in and outside of education who are struggling with this particular situation, they sometimes take morale as, we got to buy everyone lunch. They want gift cards, all of these things. So what would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I've been that person. I have been that person. In fact, in my first school year, we won't even talk about my first principalship, even though we did good work. I went in there with a plan and I didn't do a lot of the things to build relationships and do all of that. So I think with morale, you look at low hanging fruit. You celebrate and recognize everything. And it doesn't have to come in the way of tangible items, but it comes in just, I see you. I see you putting in the effort. It's a high five in the hallway when it's not pandemic time. It's an email in the morning of just, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. It is a text message to say, I hope you have a good week, or checking in at the end of the week. It's also, I think, getting to know people. So my boss told me this, and it's so good. He said, if you have a problem and you tell me, it becomes our problem. But if you don't tell me, it remains your problem. And so
Ooh, that's
that is so,
good.
it's so good, right? And so I think that's the important thing to tell our staffs too, is we are a team. I am here to help you solve issues together so you can have those wins, so we can celebrate those little things. That alone creates that morale, right? Just knowing someone has your back makes you feel good.
Yeah. Wow. That's so powerful. And people, again, people we take a lot of these little things for granted.
Mhm.
And we often say, because they are adults and this is their job, it is not my job to praise them. I mean, and this is literally, I'm sure you've heard this before.
I've been there. I've been there.
I
Yes,
mean, like, it's not my job to do those little
yes.
things, right? But actually, it is. Your
Mhm.
number one job is to serve people,
Absolutely.
not to serve the numbers, not to serve, it's to serve people. And when we
Right.
censor people, we then are able to do the harder work of transformation with the organization. So I love that you said that. I noticed though, you didn't not once mention like the gift cards and and while those things are nice and people in the moment appreciate it, the deep, the profound things that you're doing that you mentioned is, hey, that high five or that text, that
Yeah.
personal note, that goes also beyond the good job or great job.
Right. And you know what? I'm glad you said that because, and when I say I've been there, I have been there, right? Because I thought I was doing a lot of stuff and I've had staff tell me, I just don't feel appreciated. And I'm in my head thinking, but I'm doing this and I'm making this and I'm bringing you this. And it was really about understanding how they want to be appreciated.
Ooh.
And so we tapped into the 5 work languages of appreciation. And
Yeah,
I had,
that,
it's a great resource. I had my staff take the little quiz because even though I am acts of service, you might be words of affirmation. And so that means I need to write you a note card. I need to drop you an email so that you know you're feeling appreciated, welcome, seen. Really, right?
yeah, I definitely recommend every leader to do that with their staff, particularly if you are in this situation where the morale is low and you feel like, gosh, I'm already doing so many things for my staff, but I feel like none of it is really hitting. Um,
Yeah.
First off, everything we talked about in this phase 1, plus these small little notes and things, right? Acts of appreciation really go a long way for our staffs. Is there anything else that you would suggest or give advice towards this particular leader?
Yeah, I think there's 2 more things. One is around the vacancy piece, right? So you have an opportunity to build your team now because you have these vacancies. And so I think being very proactive in how you recruit. So just on the podcast The episode will release on Thursday, but we had two dynamic leaders out of Louisville, Kentucky, and they talk about talent acquisition being the most important thing they do to build an anti-racist staff and for their students. But I think when you're doing recruiting in school districts, don't rely on your HR departments to go find the people for you. Do not rely on your posting alone for people to come. You have to be proactive. So as you're rebuilding your school literally from the bottom up, you've got to be at those recruiting fairs yourself. You need to go make friends with those intern program directors. You need to get on social media and post. You get your teachers to do some walking for you. You are finding the best people to rebuild your culture. So I can't overemphasize the hiring
I
enough.
want to just name this or dig into this a little bit more, particularly as it relates to schools.
Yeah.
And you're at a high school. What I'm curious to know, what is the most, or what did you have to do as a leader, or maybe something that you're proud of as it related to talent acquisition, going out and finding things? Maybe it's the most innovative thing you've done, creative thing, maybe the biggest challenge you had to overcome. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I always work in very diverse communities, and you have to be really careful about people who are attracted to diverse communities because some people can come and see themselves as the savior, and it does more damage than it does good. So one of the things anyone who's interested in my site, I send them an email with links to my social media because I want them to see the kids that they're going to serve. So that already is going to attract and repel. So that's my whole thing. I'm attracting you or I'm repelling you before we're even going to give you airtime with my staff and my community to see if you're interested. So that's really important. And then I think when I say make friends with your intern directors, that's been a key thing. I've had private sessions with their entire intern cohort where I can go in and just talk about my school. No other principal gets to have that, but then you're attracting or repelling people right off the bat. So I think that's really important just to know right away who's on board and who's not.
You know, it's interesting because I'm also my former turnaround school principal, and this was a school that was under enrolled. I later found out that there was a handful of staff members that had been, it was a charter school, so that had been let go from the district but worked here. So there was some cleaning house, right? Like helping people find their way.
Right.
Out of the organization and in the right position, or maybe working with the right school, with the right community for them.
Yeah.
And so there was a time where I really went through that struggle, that tension of needing, which is what a lot of schools are also dealing with, particularly in urban education, needing a body in front of your kids, or sucking it up somehow and trying to move human resources around, or fiscal resources around to serve your kids, but protect the learning environment and making it safe. Because sometimes, like you said, we do more damage with bringing in and allowing the wrong person to work for our kids that genuinely don't care or don't understand, or not willing to lean into the cultural aspects of the cultural, academic, all of the aspects, right?
Yeah.
And so at that, when I first took over the school, I really didn't have like a robust HR department.
Mm-hmm.
My finance person was the HR person, and it was not, I mean, she was stretched thin, you know, this wasn't on her. It was more of an organizational issue. And one of the things that I did was I would get my seniors, like a group of seniors, and it became like a thing. And when it was teacher hiring season, we would go to this recruitment fairs. I'd put them in my car and I'd be like, you guys are going to go interview teachers today.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so we taught them just let's look at resume. They got to see real life experiences. What are you looking at this resume? What stands out? What do you like? Okay, go talk to them. What kind of questions did you ask them? Do you think that they want to work at our school, or are they just looking for a job? You know? And that became really powerful. And what I will say is, and I'm saying this because there might be some schools out there who are dealing with this situation, particularly in this pandemic, where they're stretched thin, they don't necessarily know who to hire, who's the right person. Um, but the other thing that I'll say is that it got to a point where I really wasn't interviewing our candidates anymore. We would bring them into the school building. We would ask them to do a sample lesson with it was important for us that they came into our environment and not necessarily send in a video sample of their students. We wanted them in our context. 20-minute sample lesson. The kids got a little sheet of paper at the end of the lesson and they knew the drill. Like they loved doing this because they also got to be a part of who is a part of this community.
Right,
So
right.
they write a piece of affirming feedback, a piece of adjusting feedback. We would randomly select 5 kids and we would vary it in diversity from some of our special needs students to our honors students, to our early college, to middle, average academically, to our behavior, kids who struggled with focus and needed behavioral supports, and we brought them into the interview.
I love that.
The first question, well, after we asked, how do you think you did, whatever, we briefed them before the actual interview. And it was teachers would always be really surprised, like, wow, like, so the principal isn't going to talk. The kids are talking the whole time. But they had it. And one of the questions that they would ask is, why us?
Mm.
Why do you want to work in our school with our community, with Black kids, most of us who come from poverty? Why us? And that was the most powerful question that a student could ask a teaching candidate. The look in their eye, and they got different responses. I mean, and kids were like, oh, they connect, and kids know, right?
Absolutely.
They were just like, oh, I connect with this teacher. I know that they really care. And there were some who were like, well, we're moving and we need a job. And it was never around them. And they knew immediately, like,
Yeah.
they really don't care about us. So I know that was like a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important, particularly in this season.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything else we want to say around vacancies? I know the other part is the uplifting morale part, which we got to, and I know you said you had one more thing.
Yeah, one more that I think is so important that I think principals underestimate our leaders, and that is your brand, right? So I would say start working on your brand. Now, I was a marketing major, so maybe that's just fun for me, but your school, people are exiting, your leaders left. There is a perception about your school, whether it be from your staff, from your students, or your community, but you're building your brand through that. So you need to start crafting your narrative before you let everyone else craft it for you. So you got to own that. So whether it be through social media or your communications, for me, social media has been everything. My last school, it was known for violence, teacher turnover, whatever. But you step on grounds and you start to chip away at it. And it was so not like that. So because my community wouldn't come onto my site, my campus, I had to take my campus to them. So as you're working on your school, you got to show the pictures and tell your story of the people who serve your kids, of the beautiful children that sit in those seats, right? So tell the stories, work on your brand, because that is everything. I think you start that day one.
Wow, beautiful. That's all around your vision, your values, what you care about as a principal. I love that. I mean, I couldn't have said it any other way. Any last pieces of advice that you would want to leave for this leader who can't afford to lose any more employees? They know that the employees that they have work hard. Any other steps or tips that they can take?
I would just say be honest, be vulnerable. Let your staff know you don't know all the answers. You're learning with them. It is a team effort, but don't be afraid to let them know when you're wrong or you need to ask the question. They appreciate that because, like I said, I've been there where you feel like you have to carry all that on you, but they know you're human. And actually, they want to help you as much as you want to help them. So let it be a team effort. I think that's really important.
I love it. That's been a theme that I think has probably come up in every live leadership chat we've had on YouTube so far, one way or another, this idea of authentic leadership and being vulnerable, especially in times of crisis, in a pandemic. People are not looking at you to show up suited and booted and to pretend to have it all together. They need to hear your heart. They need to hear the experiences, but also the inspiration, right?
Yeah.
They're leaning on you for that. So super important. Dr. Henry, I just want to thank you so much for, again, taking your time to come on here. You are incredibly talented, anointed. You have a calling. I cannot wait to go and download your podcast and start listening to the work that you're doing and to elevate the work through social media. If there's anything that myself or the Pavone Leadership Firm can do for you, please, we're here, we're a team. So
thank you so much. I'll put a little plug out there that we are always looking for amazing female leaders to spotlight on the podcast. So if anybody's watching that would love to tell their story and what they're doing, please reach out to me. I welcome you anytime.
That's so good. I'll also put an announcement out on our Instagram page as well, to just send you a DM if you want to be featured. You're doing amazing and incredible work. So I know it's Friday. I wish you well. I wish that your evening and weekend is in favor, and we'll connect again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.